What is there to say about Ratchet and Clank that hasn't already been said? A lot, actually. There's always something new to say, you just gotta think about it. This is debatably the most iconic franchise under the PlayStation label. The only other series I'd argue are at the same level or above are God of War and Uncharted. I know, you could also say Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon, but those aren't PlayStation anymore. They're Xbox. Sorry, had to keep it down. It's one of the few PlayStation franchises that actually stuck around past the console generation or two. I mean, we don't really hear from Infamous anymore, despite the fact there's a ton you can still do with that series. Ape Escape is practically dead by now. I mean, what do we have left? MLB The Show? I don't care about baseball, I just use bats for violence. Though, that does leave me wondering, what is it that makes Ratchet and Clank stand out amongst its peers? It's not like it's a unique trait to have a platformer trilogy in the 6th generation. I already talked about one of the other beloved ones. Watch that Jack video, by the way. I worked really hard on that. Well, I think the safest place to start is by looking at its origins. Usually, it's in the roots of the art where we can find out why it struck such a chord. So, I guess what that means is, we're gonna dive right into the Ratchet and Clank trilogy. Make sure you count all the bolts in your pockets, somehow, and get into gear, because this is gonna be a fun one. Oh, but before we do that, I actually got something really cool in the mail I want to show you all.
Hey everybody, Noah Neutron here, and I've bought something pretty incredible from the Gadgetron website. Oh, you didn't know that existed? Well, I didn't either until May 15th, 2026. Anyways, let's just see what we got here and see what's happening, alright? Oh, that's actually kind of upsetting me. Well, as I figure out what exactly is going on here, let's just talk about the first game in the trilogy.
Within my childhood PS2 collection, there was a lot of hand-me-down games. Now, that's not bad at all. In fact, it's the reason why I even got to play so many games in the first place. And trust me, I was given a lot of games. People would just hand me their entire collections. That's how I got my hands on games like Tekken 4, Twisted Metal Black, which I shouldn't have played at 9 years old, and Onimusha. But within the piles of PS2 games, platformers was one of the genres I'd come back to the most. I sorta had a big four of platformer games in my collection. Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy, Sonic Mega Collection, Mega Man Anniversary Collection, and Ratchet and Clank. Now, while I do say Jak and Daxter is my favorite of this lot, Ratchet and Clank was a super close second. One, because it was in space. Look, if you know me, you'd know I'm a big fan of sci-fi. My two favorite subgenres being space operas and cyberpunk. You can blame mainly Star Wars and Star Trek being introduced to me super young for my love of space genre fiction. So, when you tell me there's a game where you fly around space and collect a ton of destructive weapons, that's like introducing crack to an 8-year-old child. But how does that game age today? I think it's aged mostly well. There's a few snags in the wires here and there, though I think I'll blame that on it being the first game in a long-running series. Let's start with the positive, of which there's many. The first thing I want to talk about is the level design. This may be one of the best games on the entire PS2 catalog in level design alone. I heard someone somewhere once describe it as fishbowls and straws. I can't for the life of me remember who said it. I think it might have been the Golden Bolt. You should check out his channel, by the way. He makes great stuff. It's the perfect way to describe these levels, though. Basically, you're given a landing zone or a starting area with usually 2 to 3 separating paths. These paths all come with different missions or goals in mind. One path might be super platformer heavy, while others might be really focusing on the combat. It's a great way to make each road stand out from one another, but also give you this strong sense of exploration. From the first full level, you're handed these options. You can either go forward with your dinky little bomb glove and fight a lot of robots, or you could take a turn and do the small platforming section with water. On paper, this sounds like it's a no-brainer, but in execution, it really does take a lot of time to get right. And for the most part, Insomniac nailed this on their first go-around. Metropolis, or Kerman if you want to call it that, is one of the best examples of this when it comes to level design. One path of this level eventually has you doing this crazy train set piece as it hovers through the air, having you explore this mega city with this big beautiful battle, whereas the other path leads you into an obstacle course that's purely platforming. And really, a lot of the levels have this sort of combat path or platforming path, but the later levels mix it up a lot so it doesn't get too stale. Battalia is a planet around the midway point that shows us off, throwing you into intense firefights and making you realize how the platforming and shooting should work together. Plus, the cloudy, stormy atmosphere really adds a lot to this world. If I had to highlight two of my favorite worlds, they'd probably be Pokataru and Hoven. Now, it's partly because I love tropical island aesthetics in these old games, and I also do like snow levels, but I also think both of these levels provide a good mix of platforming and combat. These are both what I'd call skill check worlds that test you on your ability to deal with swarms of enemies or platforming. Though I'd probably have Pokataru just a little bit higher, because Pokataru gives you that fun jet fighter minigame, which actually has some good flight controls. It's not as good as Star Fox Assault, but they're solid. But for the life of me, why is rockets set to R1 and bullets are set to L1? I know you can use square and circle, but it's much easier to fire with the triggers when you fly a jet instead of the face buttons. Hoven is a bit lower solely because there's a turret minigame, and if you know me by now, I'm not a big fan of turret minigames in general. They can be done well, but they're usually boring to me. Like, yes, I can turn around and fire at things, how did you know? I guess while I'm at it, let's talk about the minigames. Every platformer around this time had them, so how was Ratchet's? I think they're pretty much in the middle. I already said that the flight minigames are fun and the turret sections are meh. The only other minigames are the hoverboard races, and I'm just not feeling it, for one reason. Why are these races? If you're gonna give me a hoverboard, shouldn't I be like doing tricks or something? Like a Tony Hawk game or something like that. It doesn't help that I swear if you mess up one jump or lightly bump any corner, you're sent back a couple of places in the race. These aren't infuriatingly difficult at all, but at the same time, I was kind of getting frustrated because a minor mistake was sent me so far back. Like, there was many times where I was just kind of going, really? That sent me back to third place because I bumped into a crate? There's also the giant Clank sections, the two that there are, and they're really fun. The problem is they only appear twice, so there isn't really much to say on them besides they're fun. You know, jumping back into the topic of worlds real quick, the aesthetics of this game are great. These older Ratchet games had this sort of throwback sci-fi appeal to them. For example, they could have made a lot of robots like Metal Gear or something a bit more advanced, but instead they have a lot of these old school tropes like being made of chrome and having an antenna on their heads. It's like they're taking the visual style of something like Lost in Space and modernizing it. The only closest comparison is something like Futurama, but they handle it in a different way. I'd say Ratchet and Clank is a bit more pulpy and comic book-esque in a lot of its presentation. I mean, Captain Quark is pretty much a parody of classic sci-fi heroes like Adam Strange, Buck Rogers, Captain Kirk. This design ethos also comes out in a lot of the gadgets and tools, having this sort of 50s commercialized appeal. A lot of the guns look closer in aesthetics to an old toaster than they do a real-life gun, and I think that's a good thing. It allows for their destructive power to be more cartoony than have any sort of real-world implications. It's also refreshing when compared to other sci-fi games at the time. Honestly, these games and Halo have some of my favorite sci-fi weapon designs in all of gaming. Of course, with the aesthetics also comes the setting, and it's still pretty funny. If anything, I'd say it's a much more common sentiment to be anti-corporate and crap on big CEOs, which this game was pretty much ahead of the curve on. This world is just a kind of corporate hellscape. You can literally just walk up to cubes and buy any weapon you want with enough money. Plus, it doesn't help how it seems like everyone in this galaxy is a cheapskate. You'll literally save their life and they'll hit you with the, I'll give you this thing for 2,000 bolts instead of 4,000. I'd be pissed. But it also does come together to fit into this larger theme the world is trying to weave in and out of the story and gameplay. The story is also super solid. It's one of the rare platformers at the time where I'd say the protagonist has a character arc. Not saying that this game's story is better than any other platformers, but that wasn't really a thing you'd see often. Usually the protag of a platformer was either a player insert or just a cool guy. But here Ratchet is a bit of an asshole. But I think that makes the game better. He really has no reason to get involved in this big plot. He's just acting like how everyone else here would. He wants his cash, and then he leaves. He sort of has to be snapped out of it to realize he really can help out a lot of people. And sometimes he should put his greed aside for the greater good. The villain is also great. Chairman Drek is a hateable person, and his goal being purely profit-driven is perfect. I know everyone nowadays thinks we need a villain with goals and motivations that are explored, reasoned with, or quote-unquote, have a point. But sometimes, man, people are just evil. That's just the way it is, man. And sometimes it is better to have our villains reflect that. I know some people are gonna say, but real people aren't like that. No, sometimes they really are, and there isn't a deeper reason. That's why I like Drek as a villain. Quark makes for the perfect lackey. I really like this idea that he's a guy who just sort of failed upwards, and now he's finally seeing a halt in his momentum. Thus, he's working with an objectively evil man just for a business agreement. It's a pretty good gag, and it fits perfectly within this world. But let's pivot off of that and talk about something else. The sound design. This might be some of the best sound effects work in any game. When you pick up a large collection of bolts, it's one of the most satisfying sounds in all the games. Insomniac had already cracked the code with the gem sounds in Spyro, and they just took this even further. With that also comes the soundtrack, and this is one of the best on the PS2. So many of these I'll catch myself humming even after I'm done playing. It's a great mix of synthetic sounds, samples, and something you'd find in a classic science fiction film. But it's also mixed in with a lot of electronica too. It's got all these mixed ideas from different things that you can't quite pin down, but that's what makes it work. The animation is stellar too, the way Ratchet will make these different expressions based on what's going on. Oh, and I love that each weapon squashes and stretches into existence when you summon it from the menu. Speaking of the weapons, they really do give you a vast arsenal of weapons to pick from. You really won't be lacking on any options, and that's a good thing. This works as a super strong hook for the gameplay. It's not just a platformer, it has a ton of weapons that go boom. Though obviously some weapons are going to be better than others. They start you with the bomb glove, and it's okay. It's not a useless weapon by any means, but it's not exactly going to be as consistent as the blaster or the pyrocitor, especially early on. But man, when you get to those later weapons, you feel like a one-man army. The Devastator being a personal favorite, but also the Glove of Doom and the Drum Device are great tools for crowds. Though, we all know the best weapon is the Rhino. Now, I could tell you an easy way to get this if you don't already know, just don't tell anyone I told you this because they might send the men. Here's what you do. When you get the Hollow Guys, that's the thing that disguises you as a robot, go to the lady in Bilgewater City for the hoverboard races disguised as a robot and enter a race. This will cause a glitch where you can now just walk on the track normally, standing under this certain spot right here in the video, and just holding the button on the taunter gadget. Maybe also get a rubber band and hold down the button, maybe mute the audio because it'll get loud and give you a headache like it gave me. But look, even if I got it through an exploit, I'm not gonna act like I'm not cheating, but hey, the world's cheating me out of my money, so I can do it to them. This game is still fun even with this busted weapon. It's a room-clearing rocket launcher that locks onto all enemies. Though this is where we get onto some of the flaws in the game. Actually, starting with the combat. You really gotta rely on lock-on in this game, and well, it's kind of buns. The firefights get hard, not really because there's a ton of enemies, but because there's no true way to aim or strafe. You could go into first person, but that's a bit wonky. A lot of the time you'll just be holding onto fire and just spinning in circles because that's your best option. It just doesn't feel the greatest. Sometimes it works like a dream and it's great, but a lot of the other times you feel like you're fighting to actually hit someone far too much. I'll also say the platforming feels a bit odd at times. I think it's because of the double jump. It's not really an extension to your jump like how a game like Jak or Sly would handle it. Jak's double jump brings you up and then some. It gives you extra airtime and response time. Whereas Ratchet's feels like it's barely bringing you up at all. It feels oddly heavy. It's like it freezes all your momentum before you even land on something. I'm not against the double jump being a tool you need to use wisely, but in this game it feels a bit too much like it's dragging me down. It is helped by giving you a hover and a high jump to help, but it just feels funky. It doesn't quite feel right. Also, the Clank sections that aren't Giant Clank are just boring. They're not really difficult, it's just bring a little guy here, then another, without really much else to do. Maybe they were going for something like Pikmin, but in Pikmin, there's a lot of interaction. While here, it's just go here, then stop. It doesn't help that Clank feels super slow in these sections as well. I almost forgot to mention some of the puzzles, if you want to call them that. For the most part, I just don't care for them. They could be cut if I'm being real. The Hydro Displacer puzzles were just kinda bland, and I love a good puzzle in my game. Zelda and Oddworld are some of my favorite series of all time. But these moments were mostly just dragging water back and forth between two spots. I wish there was a bit more done with it, but it's just kind of flat as a puzzle. The Trespasser was also just meh as well. You could really brute force most of these by just turning everything until it lands right. I can't think of a single one that made me go, wow, that was tricky. When really all I was saying was, oh, one of these? I guess I'll do it. However, the swing shot is goated. These are some of the greatest platforming sections in the game. They've got some good timing, and you really do have to think on your feet for a lot of these. You can't just mash the button and expect to just let it happen. It also makes a great sound and there's a super satisfying pull off to it. So yeah, overall, this is a pretty strong start, despite it being a little rough around the edges. But I give Insomniac a lot of grace on this first attempt because they're really mixing a lot of things together that hadn't really been mixed before. If I had to describe what it feels like they were mixing together, it feels like a big mix of Spyro, Zelda, and Quake. Yeah, I know they were also inspired by Mario and Metroid, but I feel like those three blended together would get you something pretty close to the original Ratchet and Clank. It's a super interesting mix of things you don't really see every day. You know, it's not a roguelike extraction shooter, deck building, Metroidvania battle royale. It's something that feels pretty fresh. Now, let's try to solve the mystery of who sold me this bootleg game.
Hey, so I just found the guy responsible for selling me that scam copy of Ratchet and Clank, and it turns out it's Captain Quark?
Hello, everybody. I'm Captain Quark, and I'm the one who sold you that amazing product.
Well, I really did not figure out how to do a good Captain Quark impression in the time to make this video, huh?
No.
Alright, well, as I try to figure out how to get my bolts back from this guy, let's just jump right into the next game. Let's talk about...
First off, this game was made just 1 year after the first one. Geez, talk about crunching to release a sequel. That would worry me if I didn't know this game wasn't made by Insomniac. They're not really known for releasing bad games, but I also wish they didn't crunch to make it. But what can you do? I can't change the past. Well, I tried to, but that deleted Django Jambo from this timeline. You don't worry about it, you wouldn't know who that is. But how much could they feasibly improve in a year? Well, apparently a lot. For one, the controls are so much better. The platforming feels a lot smoother, they actually fixed the double jump, and the combat has been made much greater by being able to genuinely strafe. Yes, now by holding down the L2 button, you can now strafe from side to side like a traditional third-person shooter. Though it's not true third-person aiming like you'd find in a game like Uncharted or Max Payne. It's more like you can strafe, but you still gotta rely on the lock-on within the game. It does make combat a lot smoother, but it can still be wonky here and there. It's not too much as to ruin the game though. Speaking of combat, the new weapons in this game are incredible. They make Ratchet 1's weapons look like toys in comparison. You start with the Lancer and the Gravity Bomb, which are basically the blaster and the bomb glove from Ratchet 1 but made much better. For one, the Gravity Bomb has a lot of impact, and the launcher has a higher damage output and rate of fire. But of course, they also brought in a lot of new and genuinely fresh ideas, such as the Lava Gun, one of my favorite weapons in the game. Instead of the flamethrower like in the previous game, it's now a long streak of lava that covers so much area. There's also the Chopper, a weapon that allows you to toss throwing stars that bounce around and hit surrounding enemies. But if I had to mention my favorite, it would be my dearly beloved Bouncer, a gun that launches a bomb that explodes into little bombs that bounce around, track to the nearest target, and then blow them up. It's an easy way to clear a room, and is the perfect weapon to use in any situation. It can cause a bit of slowdown though, but I'm willing to deal with that. Plus, you get it at about the halfway point, so it's not making the battles too one-sided or tedious. Like the Beam Reflector in Jak 3. Yeah, I'm gonna bring that up. They also made each weapon, as well as your nanotech, actually level up. Yes, now using your favorite weapons makes them better, eventually allowing them to level up and change into their final form. Each weapon has its first form, and then eventually evolves into its second form when you've acquired enough XP. A lot of the guns get better, such as the Lancer turning into the Heavy Lancer, which makes it from a fast hand blaster to a machine gun, or how the Bouncer turns into the Heavy Bouncer, which gives it bigger bombs and a larger area of effect. Though there is one upgrade that somehow makes it worse. The Lava Gun turns into the Meteor Gun, which, instead of making it a large spray or more damage, it turns into a rapid fire gun that shoots meteors. This is basically just a worse version of the Heavy Lancer. Also, like I said earlier, you can level up your nanotech or your HP, which whenever you do creates a large explosion that damages all the enemies around you. It's super satisfying whenever it happens. Speaking of combat, there's also more fights in your spaceship. It happens a few times during the game, but it's improved so much in comparison to the first game. Though, I don't know why they took away your ability to do a quick turnaround. Now it's only barrel rolls. I don't know why, and it kinda does make it tedious at times, but I'd say overall it's pretty good. Some of the missions are a decent challenge. Knowing what route to take and what enemies to lock onto is very good. A lot of the challenge coming from knowing what route to take and what enemies to lock onto. Just make sure to upgrade your ship. It will matter a lot for the later missions. Seriously, it's like night and day. My dumbass forgot to upgrade my ship before going to Gorn, one of the later planets in the game, and I got wiped pretty much instantly. Which, a little side note here, Thugs for Less is possibly the best enemy faction in the whole series. I love the idea of this group of nasty looking dudes using a lot of their funding for things like get-togethers or work trips. They seem oddly wholesome, yet they still want to kill you for money. It's a fun idea that makes for a lot of natural comedy. Plus, it's nice to have a more defined enemy faction in the game rather than the vague blarg soldiers in the first one. Not to say that they were bad, but a defined faction with goals is just more interesting. They also added more giant Quake sections and made them so much better. It's basically like a kaiju film as you destroy cities fighting other giant robots. It's like Rampage, but 3D. You ever play Rampage? It's fun, you should try it. By the way, these small worlds where you walk around on the round surfaces are so impressive. These came out 5 years before Mario Galaxy. It's super forward thinking with how they programmed these. Plus, having these massive kaiju fights on these small worlds and destroying buildings and many giant enemies adds just so much more to how cool these worlds are. Also, Clank does the Superman pose when he flies at these levels. I can't tell if this is also meant to be an Iron Giant reference, but it's cool either way. They've also changed the normal size Clank sections. For one, they're shorter, thank god, and there's more robots that command. They just changed the environment, like lifting things out of the way, making a bridge. It's nothing crazy, but the added variety is kinda nice. A new special thing they've also added to this game is arenas. It's exactly what it sounds like. Arenas where you do combat challenges for a lot of cash. A few of the bosses in this game are within the arenas, and they're pretty cool. There's Chainblade, the B2 BattleBot, and Arachnoid. Honestly, none of the boss fights are anything crazy, just jumping to dodge and firing out at the boss. It's not bad by any means, but there's not anything I'd call special. Also, the easiest boss in the game is somehow the last one. Not complaining, just more so surprised. The only boss I could genuinely say is bad is the Thugs for Less boss, because it's just a turret section. I've already said before how much these things bore me to tears, but come on man, turning an entire boss fight to one. Plus there's so many times where the boss will just stop behind a building and you could barely hit him. It's just slow, it's monotonous, it's just not fun, man. It doesn't help that it takes forever to finally get him to end. Again, this is the only boss I'd call genuinely bad. Every other one is fine or even fun. And I can't forget about the hover bike races. Now, this is much better than the hoverboard races in the previous game. The tracks are more open and allow for more movement. The boost feels like it actually has some real oomph to it. Plus, if we're being honest, racing hover bikes makes way more sense than hoverboard races. I mean, who the hell races skateboards? You do tricks, you play horse, you ride the skateboard, but racing? I've never heard that. Correct me if I'm wrong though, because I'm super disabled and can't ride a skateboard, so let me know if that's actually something people really do. The level design is also better, but it is a bit simplified. There's still quite a bit of exploration still involved, but now many worlds have unique set pieces. The first level starts you off on this really cool set piece on a ship in the air, knocking robots out of the windows and sending them flying through the atmosphere, before eventually heading out onto the ship's surface, or I guess the hull, and continuing the fight there. The best set piece in this game is definitely on Siberius, a cool new snow world. Basically having you use the swing shot to zip between these massive trucks and battling on top of them as they're driving at high speed. It's super cool and it feels like something out of Uncharted, but obviously a bit more tame. I mentioned Uncharted a lot in this video actually, maybe I should replay those. The best world overall though, in my opinion, is Algon City. The design is super nice watching as the protopets attack the citizens and just tearing through them, but also having the best grind boot segment in the game, if not the entire series. Jumping between these trains as they teleport in and out of existence is a super cool idea, and it is a bit tricky with how you gotta time your jumps. I really like it a lot, it's super fun platforming. Which makes me think, this game actually gets pretty hard later on. You'll be taking on waves upon waves of enemies. You gotta be able to time your jumps and shoot your shots just right. It never comes off as completely unfair, but it can test your steel at times, I won't lie. There is one world in this game though, that is complete bullshit. Grelbin. Why? Because of these ugly ass snowmen. They spawn in literal swarms and take 4 hits to die. It takes so many shots from the heavy bouncer to make sure they're dead. Now, while that is frustrating, you also have to collect so many moonstones while doing this. You have to run around and collect 16 stones to get required items in the game. You see this footage, right? This is terrible. I tried to research why this world was designed the way it was, but I couldn't find anything after a few searches on Google. It genuinely is one of the most annoying enemies to fight in any game. I died on this planet more times than any other game in the series. I also think this story is much funnier than the last game. I wouldn't say it's inherently better. Nobody really has a character arc, but it is funnier. It doubles down super hard on the anti-corporate, anti-capitalist themes in the first game, and I'm all here for it. Honestly, the main enemy of the game being a massive corrupt company trying to sell dangerous animals as a pet is a great idea, and it sounds a bit too accurate to what they do nowadays, not gonna lie. They explain a lot of the plot through commercials in this game, and I'm a big fan of doing stuff like this in general. It's an easy way to give lore in your world in a way that gives information to the characters and the player at the same time. It allows the writers to get away with some pretty good jokes too. Like, I'm just gonna be real. What does the crotchetizer do? Actually, let me reword that. Why does it exist and who chose to name it that? It is really funny though. The twist of the game is foreshadowed from a mile away. Spoilers, I guess, you could skip like maybe a minute or two in the head in the video, but the main villain of the game is actually Captain Quark in disguise. It's kind of perfect to show in this world overtaken by too much corporate control that one moron benefits far too much from this system and almost endangers an entire galaxy. It also explains why the plan doesn't make any sense because it's Captain Quark, the most successful idiot in the universe. Hopefully he doesn't become a major TV star and then become the president. That would suck for their reality. But that stuff only happens in fiction, right? Why are you guys looking at me like that? Did I say something weird? But yeah, this game was a big improvement over the last. It's pretty much a better game in almost every single way. It's pretty much the best example of what a direct sequel to a game should be, improving where the last game lacked and keeping a lot of what already worked. Anyways, about my bootleg game.
Alright, come on, Corkiplier. Why exactly did you sell me that bootleg copy? Or is there someone you're working for now?
It was him! Right behind you!
Huh?
That's right! It was me! I sent you the bootlegged game!
But why would you sell me a bootleg game that doesn't exactly sound like some sort of great supervillain plan?
Because nobody ever asked for my name!
I I thought Nefarious was your name. Isn't that why you're called Dr. Nefarious? Am I confused on something?
Oh, you fool! My real name is Cletus Thompson! Neutron, why are you not trying to laugh at my name?
No, I'm not. I'm not trying to laugh or anything. A lot of people are named Cletus. Yeah.
That's it! Disintegrated you!
Oh, okay. I gotta get behind cover. Okay. Hey. So as I try not to get disintegrated or anything, let's talk about the final game of the Ratchet and Clank trilogy, huh? Let's talk about.
This game was made 1 year after the last one. How did they do this? Well, okay, it's crunch, but it's still insane. Can someone please explain to me how they made this game even better than the last one? What secret sauce was being passed around in the Insomniac studios? Because it's almost unbelievable to think about it. 3 games in the span of 3 years, all of which exceed the previous ones drastically. Mind you, this was all one studio. There was no smaller studios attached to the big ones like what Crapavision or Pupasoft do. No, instead this was one set of people all working together day in and day out to get these games as good as possible. It's crazy to think about and shows the incredible amount of dedication and passion these developers have. Of course, I gotta go into detail as to why I like this game so much. So, let's just do that. I gotta say up front, the controls and combat are at their peak here. In fact, they give you 3 ways to play. The classic style from Ratchet and Clank 2 with lock-on and strafing, a legit first-person shooter mode, and the definitive style to play for the series, third-person shooter mode. Look, it's not like the other styles of play are really bad. It's more that Ratchet and Clank was a natural fit for the third-person control scheme they made. In fact, every game from here on out makes that style the default. It goes to show they knew what they had on their hands. Just the very fact that now you have a genuine reticle for almost every gun, which also now being able to properly aim while strafing just makes the gameplay way more smooth. It's like they finally cracked the code on what makes the combat work at its best. Trust me, this game is a way of making you forget how long you've been playing. There was one time I completely forgot I'd been playing this game for like 4 to 5 hours straight. I usually try to take breaks in between gameplay, but this game had me so immersed that I forgot to break away until I noticed the sun setting. It's also carried by all the new weapons they've added, as well as the tweaks they've made to previous elements. Now, every weapon has 5 levels to level up in, instead of the usual 2 to 3 from the previous game. You unlock the weapon's evolution at level 5, but usually levels 2 through 4 add little adjustments and upgrades that add to the weapon's use. For example, you have the N60 Storm, which is pretty much the improved Lancer from the previous game, though now it has even better damage and an even greater rate of fire. The more you level it up, the more you recognize the plasma rounds will bounce off the walls and objects, kinda like the beam reflector in Jak 3, but it works much better because they actually balanced it out. Then, on your final level, it becomes the N90 Hurricane, and adds on a spreading electricity effect. Usually I would toss a gun like this aside in most games, yet here they made it control so well that I found it to be a pretty reliable tool. Really, every new tool and weapon here is good to use. I'd say really what you get to level 5 comes down to how you like to play. There's a lot of player expression here, and it's done right because one option doesn't drastically outweigh the others. Also, the team has added on some fun features here. For one, if you have a previous save from Ratchet and Clank 1, you get a discount on all items that can be bought in the shop. This is referenced to the first game where you go to Gadgetron headquarters and they give you the employee discount for saving their planet. It just so happens it takes 2 years for it to activate, but it finally does activate in this game because it was released 2 years after the first. You also get a few of the weapons from going commando for free if you have a Ratchet 2 save on your memory card, though most of the weapons brought over are outclassed by the new weapons, excluding my beloved Bouncer. Man, the Bouncer's so cool. Just look at it. But they've also really gone out of their way to make these new special weapons really stand out. One I particularly love is the Rift Inducer, which eventually becomes the Rift Launcher, a weapon that fires literal black holes at enemies, of which it sucks them in and instantly kills them. When it's finally upgraded, the black holes will create electricity, and firing multiple of them will merge them together to become one bigger black hole. This is one of the coolest weapons in any game. I really can't think of a game that has cooler and more unique weapons than this. Of course, with the massive changes in combat comes a lot of the changes to the gameplay, which now they've leaned heavier into the third-person shooter elements of the series. I'd say if I had to give you a percentage or a ratio of how much the game is shooter to platformer, it's about 70% shooter and 30% platformer. Yet I can't even be mad because these levels and the combat are so well made. A lot of the levels now have these quick short platforming sections with larger sections of gunfighting where you're leaping in and out of cover and side flipping over blaster fire. Honestly, I could see a lot of elements of bullet hell here when they've designed some of these fights, though it very rarely ever gets boring. It sends you into this nice flow state where you're always getting something new to catch your eye or keep your hands occupied. This is taken to its extreme with these multi-part battles that are placed on some worlds. The designs of some of these kind of remind me of Halo. No, seriously, they're like these open areas with objectives and vehicles to get in between. It's like mini Halo. But that's not a bad thing, it's a good change of pace from the more linear levels. They'll also occasionally have you fighting with the hover ship, and it's fine. I think it takes a bit to adjust your aim to hit a target, but these are not often enough to become annoying. Within the combat, you'll be fighting off new enemies, the Tyrannoids. I still think Thugs for Less is a better enemy faction, but the Tyrannoids are always providing you with new enemies with unique looks. Like, look at these squishy little fellas and their little alien saucers. That's just really cool, right? The levels here are a bit more linear. Now most of the worlds only really have 2 separate routes, but that's something that doesn't upset me too much, because now they've placed more of an effort to have each path have a distinct challenge and set pieces to them. Though there is one standout world, Aquatos, which mainly stands out due to the sewer crystals area. A genuinely fun side mission where you have to come back as you get more and more upgrades throughout the campaign. It's also an easy way to make a ton of bullets, you have no idea. They've also brought back the arenas. They're pretty much one for one with the arenas from the previous game, but now there's a few more platforming challenges that aren't too bad either. Really, these are more so better due to the improvement in control, if anything. There's not much for me to say here other than they're pretty good. The boss fights in the game are so much better than the last few games as well. I really enjoyed this fight on Tyrannosis. Look, any boss that pulls a Battletoads is gonna get a few extra points in my book. You know, that's when a fight or a chase is from the point of view of the boss. Yes, Battletoads did it first. I think. It doesn't matter, it's still cool. Some of the fights can actually get a bit challenging. The Courtney Gears fight is a bit difficult at first. You're dealing with a lot on a small platform, but I wouldn't say it ever gets outright unfair. You just gotta learn how to manage everything while not falling off. Honestly, the only boss that truly frustrated me was the final fight with Nefarious. Really, the whole final level in general is a bit frustrating, mainly because every enemy is a bit of a bullet sponge. Not saying the final level shouldn't be difficult, but genuinely I had to dump so many rounds into these enemies. But they could kill me in just a few hits. This is with the final armor in the game and like completely upgraded nanotech, by the way. It's not bad, but maybe adding some more checkpoints would have helped alleviate the issues a bit. Nefarious really just has the same issue as the final level, just a bullet sponge where the bouncer does really any major damage to him, and they don't give you enough ammo crates to keep a consistent damage output. Aside from fighting and weapons, this game has gadgets and puzzles, and they're just as good, if not better than the previous games. For one, they've combined the swing shot and the dynamo into the new gadget, the hyper shot. This is basically making the game better by just combining the best 2 gadgets in the series into one new one. There's also the refractor, which is pretty much just the mirror shield from Zelda. But I mean, a good puzzle's a good puzzle, and Zelda has some of the best puzzles in any video game, so I guess I can't complain. There's also the warp pad, which I think is used like literally once, so that's a shame, but it is cool. The Tira Guys is probably my favorite gadget in the game, disguising you and having you do a fun little rhythm minigame. It's genuinely a bit fun, but it's only handled a few times, so I guess it's a bit disappointing, but I guess that's also fair because this game is a bit more combat heavy. The only one I really don't like is the Hacker, which has a minigame that's based on Tempest. Now honestly, I just think these minigames go on for a bit too long. It's not horrible or anything, but I just think the way it plays is not interesting enough to justify 4 separate rounds to unlock a door. Plus, it's just a bit slow. Tempest is much faster and has a much more dynamic level structure. I feel like there is a version of this minigame that's a bit more action-packed and fun, but it's just kind of boring, especially when you're getting minigames that are like 4 rounds back to back to back. It's just not interesting to me, I'm sorry. As for the story of the game, I think this may be the best one of the series. Seeing Quark made the captain of a small hero squad is fun, and seeing all these side characters from Ratchet 1 come back to work together is a genuinely great idea. They've got a really interesting and quirky dynamic going on. It feels like a Saturday morning cartoon. This is helped by Dr. Nefarious, the most iconic villain of the series, being introduced here. He's yet another example of a main villain being a mad scientist trope in a video game, but he's definitely more comedic than, say, Dr. Wily or Eggman. He's probably the funniest part of the story, aside from Quark. Though I would say Going Commando is funnier, I think this one has the better story. Does that make sense? Also, this game might have the best OST in the whole series. It's between this and the first game. They really locked in here. Just listen to the theme for Quark's hideout and you'll see what I mean. So, yeah, that's really all I gotta say about Up Your Arsenal. I guess there's one last question to answer. Why did this series last where others eventually remain forgotten or silent? Well, before I answer that, I want you all to know. It may sound a little insane what I'm about to say, but please let me cook before you immediately jump to conclusions. I had this epiphany in the shower one day. Why is it, beyond the cool guns and the aesthetic, why Ratchet and Clank stuck around so long? What is it about the core of this series and the time that it was made in that really made it stuck around and just stick for so many people? And then I had an epiphany. I noticed a strong similarity between the ethos of Ratchet and Clank and Shrek. Wait. I said let me cook. I said let me cook. Do not get mad at me. Let me talk before you say that comment, okay? Both of these series are both satirizing, but also evolving their mediums and genres. Allow me to explain. Ratchet and Clank is pretty much a send-up of the usual platformer. You're not constantly gathering power stars, chaos emeralds, or power cells. No, instead you're collecting money because everyone's greedy. Basically poking at the gaming culture at the time and how it was becoming more corporatized, yet still forcing it to push forward with many of its advancements. In a way, it was the series that forced everyone to look at it and make other platformers around it change or be left behind. It was mixing together elements of different games and new influences to make a completely unique kind of platformer that really hadn't been seen before. Shrek, in comparison, was a movie made out of pure spite from Jeffrey Katzenberg to basically completely crap on Disney. Yet there was so much they did in that movie that completely shifted animation and the culture around it. It created a true alternative to what Disney practically had a chokehold on for decades at this point. Both of these series had this satirical, don't give a crap attitude that the 2000s really had a lot of, sometimes to a dangerous fault. But both of these series were also made from a completely earnest place with a ton of heart. Ratchet and Clank and Shrek showed that we didn't just need one style of thing. We could have an alternative eventually do its own thing so well that eventually it could just become as big as the mainstream. A lot of platformers, even around this time, were trying to replicate things they saw in Mario, Sonic, and Crash. Nothing inherently wrong with that, but Ratchet showed that you can reach for so much more to make a game that wasn't just another game that was a collectathon or stage-based platformer. It was a series that was mixing a lot of things that adults were seeing in gaming at the time, as well as things that appealed to kids. Something that really could be for everyone, while not overly sanitizing itself. And that is what I think makes Ratchet and Clank so special, and what has allowed it to change and stay relevant for so long. In many ways, that's what makes Ratchet and Clank truly unique.
So yeah, how was all that? Pretty good stuff, right? Oh, you're probably wondering what happened to Dr. Nefarious, aka Cletus Thompson. I don't know. The CIA came and they took him, probably for some LCD testing or something like that. I don't know. What did you expect some sort of big climactic finale? Things aren't like that in real life, man. Things just happen, and you've got to learn to deal with that. Uh, Sorry about that. Subscribe, hit like and comment. Subscribe to my Ko-Fi. I don't know, man. Like, what do you want from me, man? I just lived a horrible encounter. Do you want me to like give you some sort of grand speech?
So yeah, that's all I gotta say about that. If you want to check out any of my other videos, go do that. I think I'm going to start doing a bit more of these platformer trilogy videos because they're genuinely really fun to make. Though I won't tell you which one it is, and it's not going to be what you expect. No, it's not Sly. Not yet. But with all that being said, did you like the video? Did you not? What is your favorite Ratchet and Clank game? Let me know in the comments below. And with all that being said, I'll see you next time.